Hello and welcome to Train Signal. This is video number 1, Client-Side Firewalls. Here's our table of contents. In this video, we're going to cover the Blue Crab Food Company's scenario and what it has to do with client-side firewalls. We're going to talk about the basics of client-side firewalls, pros and cons of client-side firewalls, talk about different types of client-side firewalls like application versus port-based. We'll go in and we'll configure the Windows built-in firewall. We'll install and we'll configure Zone Alarm. So we got a lot of work to do. Let's get started. Here's our scenario at the Blue Crab Food Company. We're about to put in a new ISA server firewall. However, one of the talking points with the CIO was how client-side firewalls like Windows Service Pack 2, built-in firewall, and Zone Alarm are different from the ISA server. Now, before installing ISA server, we want to do some testing with both of these different client-side firewalls. Now, we know that there's no silver bullet when it comes to security. In other words, there's not just one device, even the ISA server, that will entirely secure our network. To properly secure a network, you have to apply security in layers, like an onion. So, even though Windows Firewall and Zone Alarm may not be enterprise-grade firewalls, and they're not going to, by themselves, protect your entire network, they're still an important layer of your network security. So, we're about to learn about these types of firewalls and see how they can meet the needs of the Blue Crab Food Company. Now, the Blue Crab Food Company has some customized applications. Specifically, they have a custom financial application that they call CrabFin. It runs on each PC and on the main server. It listens for incoming traffic. This is from the PC's perspective. The software is sitting there listening for incoming traffic on TCP port 1213 and UDP port 4300. Now we want to see if either of these firewalls can accommodate this application's special needs. Plus we have some other needs that we want the firewall to perform for us. So on each of these firewalls, the Windows Firewall and the Zone Alarm Firewall, we're going to allow the CrabFin application to receive traffic inbound on TCP port 1213 and UDP 4300 for the local network only. So this traffic can't come from the internet or from some wide area network. It can only come from the local LAN, this subnet. We're going to block all other applications except for Windows file sharing. We're going to log denied and allowed traffic to c:firewall.log, and we're going to set the limit to 8196K or 8 megs. We're also going to allow ICMP packets from this PC client, so all ICMP can go out to the network from this PC. So let's learn about the basics of client-side firewalls. Client-side firewalls are also known as host-based firewalls, meaning they run on a host, not on a router, not on a switch, not on a dedicated firewall appliance. They run on a host, some kind of host. So these firewalls are special software that run on these hosts. It could be a PC, a Mac, a server, a laptop, just about anything today you can install a firewall on. There are client-side firewalls for every operating system used today. Firewalls became so necessary that Microsoft began including one, already turned on, in the Windows operating system. Different client-side firewalls work in different ways, and that's one of the things we're going to explore in this video, is the difference between the Windows built-in firewall and a firewall like Zone Alarm. So in general, client-side firewalls monitor network traffic on the client's network interface and take some action. Usually the point of a firewall is to stop some traffic or to only allow certain traffic through. So this application runs on the host, on the client, and it monitors the traffic in or out depending on the type of the firewall. It can monitor the applications running and what those applications are doing to the network. So there's different types, and that's what we're going to learn about. But basically that's what client-side firewalls do. Let's look at the pros and cons of client-side firewalls. So the pros of a client-side firewall are that they can monitor your network applications usage and look for unexpected usage. So they can sit there on the client or the host, and they can look at the traffic that's coming in and out of the network interface on that host. And if something unexpected happens, say there's a worm that's trying to get into that computer, it says, stop, that worm isn't coming in. They can look at the applications that are currently running, and if some new application is installed and it tries to access the network in a different way, they can say, stop right there. I have to get this approved by the user before that application can actually access the network. So they can stop this malicious traffic before it reaches your computer or before it reaches the network. They work no matter the settings in your operating system. So if you share your entire C drive and say anyone can access it, client-side firewalls can still protect your computer and still prevent that from happening. So even if there's misconfigurations or improper, insecure configurations on the client, the firewall can prevent that from affecting the security of the client. They can see all the traffic in or out of the client. They don't work at some perimeter of the network. Their perimeter is the client. So a lot of them can do more than just that. More and more client-side firewalls are being integrated with anti-spyware applications or antivirus applications. They're becoming larger and larger, doing more than what they are originally packaged to do. So let's look at the cons. Let's look at the negative of a client-side firewall. One is they must be installed and enabled. I mean, if you don't install the client-side firewall, it's not going to protect you. Now, that's a little bit different with the Windows Service Pack 2 firewall that's installed by default and it's running by default. But with other firewalls, obviously you have to go out there, download it, buy it, install it, and enable it. They have to be updated, so periodically there are going to be updates for those client-side firewalls, just like an antivirus program or the Windows operating system. You're going to have to keep patching and updating those client-side firewalls. Another con is that they protect only a single client. So this has to be done on every single client, and they're only protecting that client. If there's a client on the network that doesn't have it, it's not protected. Another negative is they may require user interaction. And in fact, many of them do require user interaction, and we'll see that with Zone Alarm. So some new applications installed on the computer, it tries to access the network, a little box pops up, and the user has to answer a question. Do you want XYZ application to access the network on port 123? Well, if the user doesn't understand that, they don't know what the application is, they don't even know what the firewall is in some cases, the user might not know what to do. So that's a negative. And then they also increase troubleshooting complexity. So if you're having problems with a network application on a client, having a firewall on there can just make that troubleshooting more complex. Let's move on to the different types of firewalls. Okay, so first let's talk about application-based client-side firewalls. So an application-based client-side firewall, its primary job is to monitor the running applications on the client. So it looks at all the different processes that are on the client, and it knows what permissions those applications have. Can they receive inbound traffic? Can they send outgoing traffic? What port? What type of traffic? So they're told which ones can receive inbound, which ones can receive outbound traffic by the user primarily. So the user will be asked, and the settings vary based on the applications installed. So the settings aren't going to be the same on every client because it depends what applications are running on that client. If that client is an email server, obviously it's going to need to receive inbound email and send a lot of outbound email. Whereas a regular PC, just a user, wouldn't need to receive inbound email as a server normally would. So another type of client-side firewall is a port-based client-side firewall. Port-based client-side firewalls don't care what applications are running on that client. All they look at is the ports that are open to receive traffic or to send outgoing traffic on the client. And a lot of these are stateful port-based firewalls, and what a stateful firewall does is typically they allow just about all outbound traffic, and they accept by default the response from that traffic. But typically by default they don't allow inbound traffic. Now I'm talking about a stateful port-based client-side firewall, not just a stateful firewall like ISA. So they let something come in only if it's been requested originally by the client. They require understanding of the ports. So to configure a port-based firewall, you need to know that, okay, this is a web server, and a web server is going to receive requests on port 80, so I have to go in and configure the client firewall to receive requests on port 80. So they force the administrator or the user to understand the ports that are necessary to make that client work. So you may be forced to leave ports open even when an application needing that port is not running. So the application-based firewall, it only has a port open when the application that needs that port is open. And there I'm really talking about server-based applications. And then malicious applications can use ports meant for valid applications. So if you say all the time that I need to have all outbound access available, and some virus is installed on that PC, well, that virus has full outbound access. So ports, if a port-based client-side firewall is only looking at ports, not applications, then malicious applications can use those ports that are meant for, regular applications like web browsing. So my last point here is, how about both? Can I have both? And the answer is yes. In fact, Zone Alarm can do both of these. So we'll look at Zone Alarm in a little bit. Let's move on to a couple different new things that are coming out on the market. Okay, NAC versus NAP. NAC is Network Admissions Control, and it's made by Cisco. NAP is Network Application Protection, and it's made by Microsoft. These are two competing standards or application types to protect clients. So these are host-based firewalls, but they're sort of special host-based firewalls. So these are used to ensure that machines meet security policy requirements before a machine is allowed on the network. So with a regular host-based firewall, you put it on there, the machine's already on the network, and the firewall just controls the traffic in or out and what the applications can do. Okay, these are essentially the same type of application that runs on a client, but what they have the ability to do is not allow the client even on the network. Not even a single packet can be sent to the network if that machine doesn't meet the security policy requirements. So examples of security policy requirements are, does the client have an up-to-date antivirus signature? Does it have the latest virus definitions? Does it have spyware software running and loaded? Is it enabled? Is the antivirus software enabled? Is the spyware software up to date? Does it have a firewall running, like Windows Firewall or Zone Alarm or some other firewall? Does it have malicious applications running? Has there been some virus suddenly installed on that machine, some new application? So that machine has to meet all these requirements and be completely up to date before it can ever send a packet out on the network. So for that to happen, the switches and the routers are all going to have to know that this client can't send a packet out on the network unless it's up to date. So these applications that are on the client, they communicate with the switch, let's say, and say, yes, this client's clean, or no, it's not clean. So these are new standards in the future, new types of applications that are going to be used to protect hosts. And primarily you're talking about businesses here, typically not home users, but maybe one day it will be rolled out to home users. So let's look at these two standards. The first one's Cisco's Network Admissions Control, NAC. And the downsides to NAC are that it requires Cisco switches. The software is very expensive. It's application-based. So when a new application is loaded on a client, even though it might be a good application that you need, NAC will catch that application and most likely not let you run it until the network administrator approves that it can be run. So it's going to require some tweaking, over time. and when new things are loaded or changed, it's going to require some more tweaking. So a lot of maintenance to make it work. But the upsides are that it creates a very secure environment. You might not even need antivirus software or patches to your operating system or I should say security patches at least, because NAC creates such a secure environment. You're almost guaranteed to never have a virus outbreak on that network with NAC. The competing standard is Microsoft's Network Access Protection. Now, NAP is really behind in development when compared to Cisco, so it's not a real product out on the market today, whereas Cisco's NAC is. Not a lot is known about Microsoft's NAP, but as it's made by Microsoft, it's certainly something that you should be aware of because it will likely be a very important part of a network in the future. Microsoft and Cisco have agreed, fortunately for us users, to make the two standards compatible, so that's good news. And speculation is that it will cost a lot less, that is, Microsoft's NAP will cost a lot less and be standard in the Windows operating system. So certainly a couple of standards to be aware of, new applications to be aware of, and these are types of host-based firewalls or client-side firewalls. So let's move on to looking at the Windows built-in firewall. Previously known as the Internet Connection Firewall, or ICF, Windows Firewall was introduced in Windows XP Service Pack 2. When installing Service Pack 2, it turns on Windows Firewall by default. Windows 2003 Service Pack 1 also has the Windows Firewall built in, but not enabled by default. One limitation to the Windows Firewall is that it controls inbound connections only. It does not care what applications on the system send network traffic outbound. Windows Firewall may ask at some point if a certain application is allowed to receive traffic. This is not allowing the application to send out, only asking your permission for the traffic to come into that application. In comparison, Zone Alarm controls inbound and outbound network traffic to and from applications. When turned on or off, Windows Firewall is turned on or off for the entire machine. You can, however, turn it on and then give exceptions to certain network adapters. With that, let's learn about configuring Windows Firewall. Now let's configure the Windows Firewall. To do this, I'm going to connect to Client 1. Client 1 is our client that we'll be using to test out the Windows Firewall. I'm going to log in as the local administrator. So here we are on Client 1. Let's start by looking at our Windows Firewall and learning about the different settings and features of Windows Firewall. To look at Windows Firewall, you go to Start, Control Panel. Now, this is called the category view here of Control Panel, and it makes icons that are more simple to understand, I suppose, and it groups things. My personal preference is the classic view. So let's go ahead and change over to the classic view. The classic view gives you a lot more options to choose from, but things are broken down better. So there's two ways to look at the Windows Firewall settings. One is to go into the network connection right here, the different network connections, and to look at the properties of your network connection. The other one, if we go back, is to go to the Security Center right here. If you click on Security Center, it takes you into this Security Center, Security Essentials, and here's an option for Windows Firewall. So a couple different ways to do it. Let's go into Windows Firewall right here. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and change the taskbar here to hide itself, so it gives us a little bit more space on the screen. All right. So on the Windows firewall settings here, you have two choices under the General tab. One is turn it on, which is recommended. The other is turn it off, which is not recommended. Pretty simple on and off switch. We have it turned off, but by default it's turned on right here. So right now it says your PC is not protected. Turn on the Windows firewall. Let's go into the exceptions tab. Now the exceptions tab here is where you configure either programs or services. Really it's either programs or ports. So how the Windows firewall works is anything can go outbound and the response can come back. So if a program initiates a connection out, the response can come back. However, if a program is listening on a port and a connection comes in, that program, that connection coming in will be stopped by the Windows firewall if it's turned on. So what you do here under Programs and Services is you tell Windows Firewall what programs are allowed to receive inbound connections that weren't initiated originally going out. You can also add specific ports to be just left open all the time, regardless of what applications are running or what applications are using those ports. So here you have an application-based firewall and a port-based firewall. But this is only for inbound connections. It has nothing to do with outbound connections. So we'll see in a minute with Zone Alarm, you have a lot more control of both inbound and outbound connections, and even more granular control of inbound connections. So let's go ahead and look at the next tab here, which is the Advanced tab. With the Advanced tab, you can turn on the Windows Firewall, and then you can create an exception right here to say that this connection, let's say, does not have the Windows Firewall enabled. So even though it's on for the whole system, this interface, this local area connection, doesn't have it on unless that check mark is checked right there. You can go into Settings, and under Settings you have different services that can be allowed just for that interface and that service. So you can be a little bit more granular here. So if you wanted to run a web server just on this port and allow an exception, I clicked right there, so it's about to allow an exception for port 80, which would be the web server, just for that interface. I'm going to uncheck that. We don't need that right now. And then under ICMP, this would be just for this interface as well. So let's say cancel. Here's the security logging settings. So here is where we would choose to log dropped packets, log successful connections. So by default, you're not logging anything that's being dropped by the firewall or anything that has a successful connection. Okay, here's where the log goes right now, and it has a size limit of 4 megs. So after 4 megs, it starts writing over itself again. We can go into ICMP here and take a look at the ICMP settings. So we can allow ICMP redirects, outgoing packet is too big, incoming, mask request, router request, outgoing source quench, so a variety of different things. By default, the only thing allowed is the incoming echo request, and that's just so someone can ping this workstation. And then finally, you can restore all the settings back to the default if you chose to. So there aren't a lot of options under Windows Firewall. You'll see once we get to Zone Alarm, there's so many more choices, so many more features. But, you know, hey, this is free. It's included with the Windows operating system. Doesn't do a lot, but it's a lot better than not having a firewall at all. So to get started, let's go ahead and turn it on for the whole machine. And then let's go in and configure what our scenario requires for the Blue Crab Food Company. So first we're going to go into exceptions. So our first task is to add the crab fin application. This is the Blue Crab Food Company's specialized financial application called the crab fin application. They use it for their financials, and it requires 2 ports, TCP port 1213 and UDP port 4300. Now it requires that a suite of applications run on these clients and listen on those ports and allow things to come in. because it's a suite of applications, we don't know exactly which application is going to be listening. So we want to open those ports all the time, but only for the local subnet. We don't want other networks across a wide area network or people from the internet coming in and getting into those ports. Only people on this local network. So while using the add port feature to open ports up all the time is less secure than using the add program, we're going to limit that less security by making sure that only the local subnet can get in on those ports. So to do this, first we're going to click on Add Port. I'm going to type the name, CrabFin. This is going to be port number 1213, and it uses TCP. I'm going to click on Change Scope, and we're going to say this is for my network, my subnet only. And you could even break it down to, only a specific IP address, only a specific computer like a server or something could connect on these ports. But we're going to say my network, my local LAN only. Say OK. And then we've got all this added. We're going to say OK here. And notice we added the CrabFin port. So that's open. We're going to go ahead and add the second one now. I'm going to call it CrabFin UDP. Has to have a different name. It's going to be port 4300. UDP traffic. Change the scope to my local subnetwork only. And say OK. Now we've added both of them. Pretty simple. The confusing thing about this list here is it says programs and services. But notice that these are programs down here, remote desktop, remote assistance. But then there's also services like CrabFin. These are really ports. These are really open ports. So to me, it's a little bit confusing here because it lists out open ports, but also applications that are listening on specific ports. And it really doesn't show you which one's which. So like if you go in here to file and print sharing, you can see that these are actually ports, open ports. On the other hand, if you go in here to remote assistance, you can see this is actually a program. So that program's able to listen on any port that it needs to do its job. But just from looking at this list, you can't really tell the difference. So we added both of our new ports, CrabFin and CrabFin UDP. Our next task is to block all services but the CrabFin applications and file sharing. That was on our list of tasks to complete for the Blue Crab Food Company. So to do that, we're simply going to uncheck Remote Desktop and Remote Assistance and leave CrabFin, CrabFin UDP, and file and print sharing. So we've disabled these applications from being able to listen and receive inbound traffic. Okay, that was easy. Next, let's go in and set the firewall to log all denied and allowed traffic and send it to a certain log file and control the log file size. So to do that, we're going to go into Advanced. We're going to click on Security Logging Settings right here. And I'm going to say we're going to log all drop packets, all successful connections. Basically, we want to log everything that comes in or out. And then we're going to change where the log goes just to make it easier to find. I can never remember that it's in C:\Windows pfirewall.log. We're just going to put it in C: and call it firewall log. That way it'll be easy. We're going to change the size of the log file so we can hold more in there. We're going to change it to 8 megs or 8196K. So we got that all set. We'll say OK. Our last task to complete is to change the ICMP settings. So to do that, we're going to go into Settings right here on ICMP. And our task is to allow all outgoing ICMP traffic. Now, normally you'd only want to do this if you had some specific application that needed that. But that's on our list of tasks to complete for Blue Crab Food, so that's what we're going to do. But notice these are incoming, incoming, incoming. This is incoming, and then here you have outgoing. Here are redirects. Here's another outgoing. So we're just going to check all the outgoing. And there we go. We checked all outgoing, so all outgoing ICMP traffic will be allowed by the firewall to go out. And we'll say OK. And say OK here. We're going to close the Security Center and close out the control panel. The last task we need to perform is to see if this Windows firewall is really working. Are these log settings that we applied really logging the data that goes in and out? Let's find out. To do that, I'm going to go to Start, going to open Internet Explorer, and I'm just going to type in a fake internet address that isn't really going to bring up a website at all, but it's going to create some traffic. So I just typed in a web address here. Going to hit enter. And I don't know where that goes at all, but we don't have internet access right now, so it doesn't matter anyway. But what it's going to do is it's going to try to connect to this web server out here. It's going to fail, but in doing so, it's going to create some traffic that the Windows firewall is going to log. So we'll just let it fail. Then we'll go look at the Windows firewall log, and we'll look for this IP address in the log. Okay, it failed. Let's go to my computer, go to the C drive, and remember we called our firewall log c:firewall.log. So it's a text document. I'm just going to double click it, open it up, and let's take a look. Obviously it logs the date, the time, the type of connection, TCP, UDP, the source IP address, the destination IP address, the source port number, so this is from our machine, what port did it originate from, the destination port number, so obviously all these 80s right here, these are going to web servers. These are web requests. The 53, if you know DNS, you know that port 53 is DNS, so that's a DNS request. The 123 here, that's actually time. And let's go down to the bottom and look for our request. We know we went to web server 123.123.123. Well, there it is right there. There aren't too many of those in the log. So we see we did an open TCP from our IP address, this is us right here, to this web server. Our source port number was 1547. The destination port number would be 80, which was the default port number of the server. I didn't type in 80, but Internet Explorer, by default, when you type in an IP address or a domain name, it assumes it's a web server because it's a web browser, and it's going to go to port 80. Now, if we had got a response, you would have seen the source and destination reverse, and you would have seen the source and destination port number reverse. So the response would have looked like source 123.123.123.123, destination 192.168.1.12, source port number would be 80, destination port number would be 1547. So obviously it didn't work here and it closed the connection. So that's the next line, and that's all. That's all we have right now. But look at all this other traffic that's happening on this PC. I haven't even done anything, and there's traffic occurring. So, you know, this is a great security audit logging feature here to see all the traffic that's going in and out of the PC. So, you know, if something happened in the middle of the night, you come in the next morning, your computer has a virus, you could look in the log here and you can see, you know, what traffic came in, what traffic came out. You know, maybe someone was trying to get into your computer. You can hopefully tell that with this log. So let's close that out. And I'm going to minimize client 1. Let's go back to our slides. And we successfully configured the Windows Firewall to open ports for certain applications. We said that those ports would be all the time. If we had a specific application that was going to need access to act as a server to allow incoming connections, we could have done that with an application, by adding an application. We changed the ICMP settings, we changed the logging settings, we requested more detailed logging, and we tested that. So we learned a lot about the Windows Firewall. The Windows Firewall isn't the best firewall around, but it is built into Windows, and it's free, and it has some decent features. So with that, let's move on to a more advanced firewall called Zone Alarm. Now that we've seen what the Windows Firewall can do and how it's limited to only controlling inbound network traffic, let's look at a more advanced host-based firewall called Zone Alarm. Zone Alarm is a free and basic firewall made by Zone Labs. And now that Zone Labs is owned by Check Point, they're coming out with a lot more advanced features with a lot more variety of products. Originally there was just Zone Alarm, and today there still is just Zone Alarm is available and it's free. However, Zone Labs offers a number of more advanced products like Zone Alarm Pro, Zone Alarm Internet Security Suite, and Zone Alarm Antivirus. So the Zone Alarm product is becoming more and more of a large package with all sorts of different security features. So that we can see the advanced features that are available in Zone Alarm Pro, we're going to be using Zone Alarm Pro evaluation version in this video. However, the free version of Zone Alarm will perform most of the same functions that the Zone Alarm Pro version performs. So let's get on with installing and configuring Zone Alarm Pro. To get started downloading and configuring Zone Alarm Pro, you can download Zone Alarm Pro evaluation version from this web link, or you can go to zonelabs.com and navigate to their download section and download Zone Alarm Pro. Before we start configuring, I want to point out that when we're done with this lab, we will disable the Windows Firewall and uninstall Zone Alarm. That way these things don't interfere with what we'll be doing with ISA Firewall. So with that, let's go ahead and go down to Client 1. And on Client 1, I've already downloaded Zone Alarm Pro. That's because this client doesn't have internet access. So I'm going to go to my computer, the C drive, where I put the download file. So here's a download file right here. I'm going to double click on that and run it. We'll just take the default directory for installation, type in my name, email address, uncheck those boxes, say next, accept the terms of the license agreement, and install. Now, Zone Alarm Pro installation takes a little while, and in that time we're going to lose network connection, which means my session here is going to freeze up and we're not going to be able to see what's going on anymore. So once the installation is done, we're going to come back and connect to this client again, and I'll be able to show you the Zone Alarm Pro configuration and management screen. So in the meantime, I'm going to pause this video, and when we come back, the client will have come back up and Zone Alarm Pro will be installed. Zone Alarm Pro has finished its installation, and the only thing you didn't see because of our network connection here was it asked me to fill out a little survey as to what type of internet connection I had, if I was using this product for home or work, if I had antivirus installed. It said, do you want to start Zone Alarm? I said yes. Then it said you must restart your computer. So the computer restarted. When the computer restarted, it came back up. I logged in, and it gave me one screen here. It said it found a new network. Let me show you what that screen looked like. Looked just like this. It said it found a new network, and that would be my local LAN interface. It said it detected a private network. It knew that because of the IP address. And it said, do you want to keep this in the internet zone? Say this is connected to a questionable access point like at a hotel, and we want to keep this very secure. I could have selected that. But since this is our private LAN here, this is the Blue Crab Food Company's network, I selected Allow into Trusted Zone, and I gave the network a name. I called it Internal Lab Blue Crab Food Company. I said OK, and then the management console for Zone Alarm came up, and that's where we're at now. So let's go look at that. This is the management console here for Zone Alarm. So let's just kind of briefly go through the different things you can do here. Just at the top it says Internet In-Out. You can stop all internet access immediately by pressing Control S or clicking this button. It shows you your different networks. You can lock the internet so no one can access the internet further. Shows you your different programs here. Shows you your status. 0 intrusions have been blocked. So it has an intrusion prevention, functionality. It has a tutorial you can go through. It says the firewall's up to date. That was one of the disadvantages I pointed out is with firewalls, you have to keep them up to date. So outbound protection, there are 13 programs secured for internet access. So it knows what programs are running on this computer right now, and it knows what to do with those, whether they can get out or not. Now, I mentioned how Zone Alarm has some additional functionality that typical firewalls don't. Here's email protection, so it can scan email attachments and quarantine those. It has anti-spyware, so if there's some application that's being installed, it can protect you from that and point that out and say, are you sure you really want to do this? So here's the status. Let's go into the firewall screen here. Now, Zone Alarm has the concept of zones. So there's the internet zone security and there's the trusted zone security. Now what this really is things that are coming from or going out to some other network. So they're not on your local network. That's what they call the internet zone, because typically that's the internet on most computers. Then there's the trusted zone. The trusted zone would be computers that are on your local network. So you can set different security ratings for each of these different types of zones. Let's look at the zones. So here's the Blue Crab Food Company network adapter here, the internal LAN. That's what I named it when the program came up, and I said this is a trusted zone. Over here in Expert, we're going to go in here a little bit later. This is where you actually define rules that you would think of on a typical firewall. These are the type of rules here that we'll be defining on ISA. We're going to add some rules for the CrabFin application in just a minute. Before we do that, let's go over to Program Control. So there's some ratings here for programs. Right now it's set at medium, the default. Programs must ask for internet access and server rights. So you can go into Programs, and here's all the different programs running on the computer. If you start a new program, it's going to pop up right here. And Smart Defense, it can automatically, rate these programs on what type of network access they need. Over here, you can tell it how much you trust these programs. Are they super trusted, restricted? Ask or kill this process because I know it's a bad process. We can go over here and if they need to gain access to the trusted network, the local subnet, you can give them that right here. So this would just be going outbound. So this is something that Windows Firewall did not do. Windows Firewall only controlled inbound access, which Zone Alarm calls server right here. So the ability for these programs to act as a server means the ability for some computer out on the trusted zone or on the internet outside of our network, for those computers to come in and connect to this program on whatever port this program is listening on. So that's the ability to act as a server, the ability for incoming connections to come into this program, into our computer. So these check boxes here mean do you want to allow that or not. So this is definitely not. Block. Ask would be you would be prompted. Or allow, say this is an email server. I know that this program that's on here is the SMTP mail server. I'm definitely going to allow access for inbound programs to come into that. Oh, and then can these programs send mail? Yes or no? Well, of course, if it's an SMTP daemon, it's going to have to be able to send mail. Let's go on here to anti-spyware. It scans the system for anti-spyware. Of course, it has to have spyware definitions updated. Antivirus, it can, because this is Zone Alarm Pro, it can do antivirus. Email protection. Privacy, it can control cookies, it can block pop-ups. Identity lock. Alerts and logs, we'll go into alerts and logs in a little bit. So with that, let's get started configuring our task for the Blue Crab Food Company. So first we have to configure the ports that need to be opened for the CrabFin application. Those were TCP 1213 and UDP 4300. To do that, many times you would go into program control and the program would actually be running and you would say that this is a server and it needs inbound access. But in our case we said this Blue Crab financial application is a suite of programs. We really don't know what programs will be running. So how we're going to do it is we're going to go create a firewall rule, just like we would on ISA server and just like we'll be doing on ISA server. So we're going to create a firewall rule. We're going to go into the Expert tab here, and we're going to say Add. And we're going to call this CrabFin. That's our first one, just like we called it on the Windows firewall. It's going to be enabled. The action is going to be allow. We can alert and log. We can always log, or we can do none. Just leave the default there. So let's click on modify for the source. We'll add a location and we'll say the trusted zone, because remember we said we only wanted to allow this access for the local LAN. So the local LAN, that's the trusted zone. And then destination is going to be my computer. For the protocol, click modify on that, click add protocol. TCP, this is going to be the CrabFin TCP port 1213, and that's going to be the destination port. So that's coming into us. So we're going to say other right here, and then we're able to type in the port. So that's how you configure a new port. Obviously, Zone Alarm has a number of other ports here that are created by default that you could select from. But we have a customized application here. So I'm going to say OK. And notice this is added. And this is how we add a new rule. So we're done with that one. We'll say OK. And let's add the second port. So this is CrabFin UDP. Source is the trusted zone. Destination is my computer. I'm going to add a protocol. Make it UDP. Still other. And the port is 4300. And we're done adding that. I'll say OK. So we've added our two rules here for the CrabFin application. Notice this is checked. So these are enabled. This is what the rules look like. We could even set a time limit here and say, well, this can only happen between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Okay. So our next task is to block all services but the CrabFin application and file sharing. Now to do that, we're going to go to main right here. It says you have unsaved changes. You want to save them now? Yes. And we're going to talk about the trusted zone security right here. We're going to customize that. So if we look at this right now, it's set at medium. It says sharing mode. Computers can see your computer and share its resources. That sounds like file sharing, doesn't it? Let's double check. Let's go in here to custom. And right now it has, we're on the trusted tab, notice. We're on the high security setting, so we actually have it set to medium. So let's go down to medium. And basically we can go in here and block things. We can block ICMP, we can block UDP ports, TCP ports, but basically what we're wanting to do is really already done by this sharing mode. Notice if you go in here on high, has allow, and that's because high blocks a lot of things and you have to go back in and allow them, whereas medium allows a lot of things and you have to go back in and block maybe some other things. So really what we wanted to do there to match the settings of the Windows firewall is already done by this trusted zone security. So file sharing will work, and so will the CrabFin application. For our next task, we want to go in and log all denied and allowed packets and send the log file to c:/firewall.log and set the size to 8196K. To do that, I'm going to go to Alerts and Logs. Over on Alerts and Logs, we have here the default of alert events shown set to medium, show only high-rated alerts. Event logging is on, that's important for the task we need to perform. Program logging is high. And then just below this box here, there's a button, a single button that says Advanced. I'm going to click on that Advanced button. You can't see that Advanced button because of the screen resolution, but this is what happens when you click on the Advanced button. You get this advanced window. So here you can tell it what alerts you want to be alerted on or logged. So you have some specialized customized control over the type of alerts. Here you can go into System Tray Alert, and you can tell it if you want to enable a System Tray icon alert. And then log control. This is really what we wanted to get to. So right now the log file goes to c:/Windows internet log zonealarmlog.txt. We want to change that and send it to c:/firewall.log. So I'm going to say save and say yes, I really do want to replace it. So there's our new location for the firewall log, c:/firewall.log. Now the current log size is 40,000 bytes. Let's go ahead and clear out the log. I'm going to say yes, permanently delete it. So we'll zero it out. Zone Alarm doesn't have a function to overwrite the log over 8 megs, but it archives log text files every 1 day by default. Let's change that to every 5 days, give us a little bit more room in the log. And that's all we can do on this. But one of the things we needed to do was to log all inbound and outbound traffic. There's no option in here to do that. So to do that, we're going to have to create a firewall rule. So let's go ahead and close this out. And let's go into Firewall. We're going to have to create an expert rule to be able to do what we want to do. So to do that, I'm going to say add. And I'm going to call this log all inbound. Okay, that won't fit. Log all in and out. So that's the name of our rule. Now to track, we're going to log everything. The action is allow. State is enabled. And we're just going to leave all the defaults down here. So log all in and out will log any source, any destination, any protocol, any time. So that's effectively the same thing we turned on the Windows firewall when we said log all inbound, or log all allowed and log all denied traffic. So I'm going to say OK. And then over here in our logging, yes, we'll save those now. Over here in our logging, we can go to this log viewer tab. And in this log right here, we should start logging all inbound and all outbound traffic. So let's create some traffic. Let's go to Start, Command Prompt, and I'll type ping 123, 123, 123, 123. So here we're creating some traffic. The ping failed, but the point is we created some traffic. So let's go to our log. And the traffic hasn't shown up yet, but let's open the log file ourselves and just take a look at the text version of the log file. So it's at c:/firewall.log. And there's still Windows Firewall stuff in here. Obviously it didn't delete it very well. But down here at the bottom you can see it started writing the zone alarm information. So notice the format of the zone alarm information changed. From here was Windows, and here's zone alarm. So at this time, this date, the ping command ran, and we ping this destination 123.123.123, and notice up here it says the ping command was unable to obtain permission for connecting to the internet. Access was denied. So Zone Alarm blocked our ping command. That's why we got this error code. So Zone Alarm is aware of the ping application, and you have to specifically permit the ping command to go out. So to do that, let's go to Program Control and look in here, see if you see ping right now, and here it is right here. So Smart Defense is auto, trust level is questionable. Well, we trust the ping command, so I'm going to say trusted, and for access I'm going to say allow for the local trusted network and allow for the internet. Now ping can't come in, but it can go out. So it can go out and then the response can come back. But if I didn't initiate the response from this computer and ping traffic just came in, it's not allowed right here. It would be prompted. We would be asked if the ping command could, or if ping traffic, ICMP traffic could come in to our machine. So now that we did that, let's click here to overview, and let's go back to the command prompt and let's try to ping again. Now this destination here, this 123.123.123, doesn't exist. We just made that number up. So obviously the ping is going to fail. But what's different here is we didn't get this error code 65. Instead we got request timeout, which would be normal for an IP address that doesn't exist on our network. So with that, let's go back and let's look at the logs. And I'll click on, here's the log viewer here. And you can see here's some ICMP traffic that's shown up in the log. And here's our 123.123.123.123 destination. Notice it was outgoing, it was allowed, and it came from client 1. There's no destination DNS. So we are logging traffic. And notice here we're logging even other types of traffic. This is port 53 going to our DNS server, 192.168.1.11, destination IP, destination port number is 53. You know that 53 is DNS. So we've got some traffic going in and out, and we're logging it all. We're logging traffic that's allowed, and we're logging traffic that's blocked. So the last task we had to perform is to allow all outgoing ICMP traffic. To do that, we're going to go to Firewall, go to Main, and look at our zones. So let's just say that we want to do that for the internet zone security, because we haven't been in there yet. We're going to say Custom, and right now we're set to High. Notice back here, we're set to High. So we're looking at the high security settings right here for the internet zone. So we want to allow all outgoing ICMP. We said that was our task. So if we scroll down and look at the list of choices here, here's allow incoming ping. So right now no one can ping us from the internet, which is good. Allow other incoming, allow other outgoing. Yep, that's what we want to do. Allow outgoing, allow other outgoing ICMP. And that's all the ICMP choices for the high security setting. So we've done that. We've allowed all outgoing ICMP. So with that, we've completed all of our tasks on Zone Alarm. Zone Alarm is obviously a very feature-rich firewall. This is the Pro version. You can evaluate the Pro version at no cost for a limited time period. But even if you choose to download the regular Zone Alarm free version, most of these things that we did are all in that. Zone Alarm, the free version even, has a ton of features. So let's go ahead and minimize this. We're done with our task for Zone Alarm, and go back to our slides. Now when we're done, we want to make sure that we disable the Windows Firewall and uninstall Zone Alarm. As soon as this video finishes, I'm going to do that to make sure that that doesn't interfere with the task we're going to perform using ISA Firewall. In conclusion, we learned about the good and the bad of client-side host-based firewalls. We learned how they have to be installed, enabled, configured, updated, and they require a little bit of advanced knowledge that the average user may or may not have. We learned about application versus port-based firewalls and how most firewalls today are a hybrid. They understand both applications and ports. We learned about NAC versus NAP, a couple of emerging firewall technologies that are like firewalls but different. They have some higher level security features. We configured the Windows firewall, and we installed and configured Zone Alarm. We learned about how these firewalls are similar but different. With that, that's the end of video number 1, client-side firewalls. Thank you very much.